China's new artificial intelligence model, DeepSeek, is being called Beijing's Sputnik movement. References, of course, to the launch of the first Soviet satellite, which triggered off the space race with the United States. Now, the US has just triggered off a technology war with China with the CHIPS Act, which is now rapidly turning into an AI war with the launch of DeepSeek. Joining me now are Siddharth Pai and my colleague Karthik Malhotra, who tracks technology and economy, to tell us more about what's at play here. Welcome to the News9 Plus show. Karthik, 1.5 trillion wipeout of stock market valuation to DeepSeek. Is this the biggest tech disruption in the history of the world?
Oh, definitely. In fact, the $1.5 trillion wipeout is one part of it, but a lion's share of that actually comes from NVIDIA alone. And almost 600 billion was 600 billion or so, 584 billion or something was the exact figure.
Yes.
A 17% dip in NVIDIA stocks, and not just NVIDIA. Add to that Google, the parent company being Alphabet, add to that Microsoft. The players who are deeply invested in the AI story have seen pretty much what we call a bloodbath in the market, right? And Jensen Huang, the poster boy of artificial intelligence, is poorer by just about $20 billion or so
what's
overnight.
20 billion? That's just small change for Jensen Huang. He's possibly one of the potential trillionaires in the decade ahead. But
I mean, is he going to stay a trillionaire? I don't know. The jury is out there after DeepSeek.
We
really don't know whether
our appreciations of where we are. And Siddharth, you know, we were just talking about how DeepSeek just came out of nowhere, literally. And there was a CHIPS Act with the United States had put in place where your H800 chips all put behind China's reach. How did China really come up with DeepSeek in such a short span of time?
So I think that's a fantastic question. There is an official reason and an unofficial reason. The unofficial reason given by most market participants is that China has actually subverted the CHIPS Act, as well as the restrictions on getting cutting-edge technology, including whatever they need from ASML, etc., to develop these chips.
Right.
The official reason from the Chinese department, from the Chinese state, as well as the company DeepSeek, is that they've actually managed to find a way to end up passing a large amount of information, which is not as computationally intensive as the way that OpenAI, Google Gemini, Claude, etc., Anthropic, etc., have actually ended up building the models itself. So it seems to be an entirely new, different way of actually doing it, using a similar kind of architecture that's far more effective. I think one of the biggest advantages, you can actually download these models and end up actually running them on your own system, compared to what you end up needing with Gemini, etc., which actually runs on the cloud. So China seems to have done what China does best. They have taken something that exists, made it far more affordable, manufactured the hell out of it, and they've actually creamed the entire market. And we'll, of course, have to wait for some of the benchmark tests to come out and for people to end up finding holes in this. But as far as the market is actually concerned, I think what used to be a one-horn race now suddenly have two different people running, and the rest of the world is actually waiting with bated breath.
Absolutely. We are waiting with bated breath. One-horse race has turned into a horse and a dragon race, Karthik, if you can call it that. But, you know, the thing is that in China's case, when we're talking about the line of actual control, what India usually says is there's a trust deficit. Right. Can you trust Chinese AI on your phones, given the fact that even TikTok has been looked at with such suspicion? You know, a reel-making platform like that, would you actually want an AI software, a Chinese AI software on your phone, given the fact that it comes from the Chinese state itself?
You know, Sandeep, I think it's a very interesting question, and honestly, I think, you know, if you think deeper and if you take the discussion to consumer behavior, what are consumers actually looking for? Consumers want convenience, and they want convenience at a low cost.
Right.
So whether it is those cheap plastic products that China first started exporting to the world, followed by cheap mobile phones, and then apps which are reverse engineered Me Too apps, which end up actually becoming much bigger than their inspiration. At the end of the day, I think you're looking for something which will make your life easier, and it comes to you at a low cost. So China has always played the low cost card. Now, I think what is different in the case of DeepSeek is the fact that it is low cost, but touted to be a far more superior product. And how it's playing the superiority card is also fairly interesting, because, you know, I mean, you asked that question sometime back, or you mentioned it as part of your opening, that how do you actually turn around something like this in a matter of months? In fact, I mean, 2023, 1.5 years, 18 months or so, if you're able to turn around and if you're able to create a product which is far superior to the platforms and the tools that we've been exposed to in the past, which were years in the making, where on an average, I mean, I was just looking at some data, on an average, the kind of budgets that AI has in the US are about $500 billion, and the total cost of producing DeepSeek is under $6 million. So 500 billion annual cost versus initial cost of building it in under $6 million is pretty much, the cost of Gravity and India's own moon mission, right? So, so that is one analogy.
The movie Gravity.
The movie Gravity and India's own space mission. So I think what China has done beautifully is that it has reverse engineered, it has used existing knowledge, it has seen prototypes, but what it has done very smartly is the kind of scaling that it is using. So traditionally, the GPT and the co-pilots that we are a little more accustomed to right now have been using something called pre-test scaling, which is these large language models on which these bots are trained. So they pretty much are geeks, they know everything about everything, and hence they're able to quickly churn out answers for you. That is followed by something called the post-test scaling. So post-test scaling is that your answers are not great, a little more user input, and let's refine the answers for the next user. But basically, you're sitting on large language models which are trained and which are updated real time, and there's a lot of information for them to crunch. What China has done differently and what DeepSeek has done differently is that they are actually crunching all this information real time for you. So there's no LLM involved. You don't have a lot of data sitting on a lot of data centers and a lot of GPUs. And as the query comes, you start hunting for the best possible answer there and then. So I think that is the broad difference. But I think, again, early days, we'll have to actually give it time and see that did they actually subvert the US export control on NVIDIA chips, the NVIDIA 800 chips. I mean, there were stories, and we've also discussed those stories in the past, Sandeep, that Chinese national citizens traveling to the US, just buying NVIDIA chips off the shelf and taking them as part of their luggage back to China.
Absolutely, the digital espionage of the 21st century. But Siddharth, the government of India plans to spend something like 10,000 crore, which is over $1 billion, in putting up a INDIAai mission for creating this ecosystem. There doesn't seem to be very much activity on our front. I mean, there is a DeepSeek, and there seems to be a deep sleep on our side. Is this a wake-up call for us? It is certainly for the United States, but is it for India as well? Where are our AI models?
No, I think that's true. Actually, India has seen a fair amount of debate on whether we need foundational models or not. People like Mr. Koshi from the ONDC, Nandan Nilekani, etc., have actually spoken about that as well. But I think what it actually boils down to the fact that the amount that India spends on R&D is actually a drop in the ocean compared to what China and the US end up actually spending. I think it's actually no. If you look at our educational institutions also, for that matter, how many supercomputers do we have? How many GPUs that we have that end up actually training these kind of models? We have for a long time as a country failed to end up actually investing into these kind of frontier areas. Now suddenly with the government coming up with an AI mission, for that matter, with about 10,000 crores, we actually need a lot more money. We actually need a system of incentives for our technology companies and others to end up actually investing. If you notice, Microsoft is actually cutting open checks when it comes to this one, OpenAI. Even the entire Chinese machinery is actually investing very heavily into its own internal capabilities. But whereas we've seen Infosys invest into OpenAI, Infosys hasn't made a corresponding investment into any Indian startup or to even end up seeding anything for that matter itself. So I think it is a wake-up call, not just from the government, but also from the private sector as well. We can't end up being end consumers of AI. We also have to end up being people who end up actually building upon it also for that matter. And the way this race is coming about, if you don't own the foundational models, if you don't have basic compute, you will always be a consumer, and it'll become like what oil has been to India, where we've always end up being depending on other nations. We will end up actually depending on other nations when it comes to compute as well as when it comes to AI as well. So India needs to end up getting it back together.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Siddharth, for illuminating the pitfalls of this INDIAai mission, the fact that we continue to be dependent on foreign countries, not just for our oil, but now it seems increasingly for artificial intelligence as well. What you just outlined, both of you gentlemen, is the fact that this is a big, big wake-up call for India. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching the News 9 Plus show.